Hi there, my name is Meg Brierley and I'm based in a place called Clitheroe in Lancashire, and I've been supporting prayer spaces in schools projects for a number of years here in local schools and actually hosting them at our 24/7 House of Prayer here in Clitheroe. I'm going to start by taking you through some suggestions for getting started, specifically in a primary school setting, though much of the tips and tools at this stage do cross over really nicely into secondary. What I would say, first of all, is getting started. There isn't a perfect chronology of those steps that you might take. You can find on the Press Spaces Schools website, and you will be provided with some of those links, that there's a number of recommended steps that are in a step-by-step order, but really we're all in a completely different context and we're all in really unique settings. It depends on what relationships you already have and what already exists in terms of resources. So don't be frightened to sort of dip in and out of those suggested steps in whatever way feels really normal and comfortable to you. The second thing I would say, before even getting started, is to think about sustainability. This is something that I've definitely, along with my team, we've definitely had more of as a focus looking back, because we've realised that our capacity, our level of resources, perhaps are not up to speed with how our prayer spaces projects have grown. So from the very beginning, if you can, is really think ahead to how is this going to be sustainable? What's our dream, and how is that going to be sustainable in the future in terms of what we can provide and how we can create a way of enabling our churches, our schools to take this on and steward it themselves long into the future. So, the first things that I would suggest when getting started from a primary school context is get some training done. So tick, you're already here, you're watching this video, you're already doing what is so important, and that is to meet and chat and be around like-minded people. So just sharing stories and hearing people's experiences, asking questions, seeing videos of prayer spaces in action, seeing images of prayer spaces, reading stories and experiences that other people have had, not just to practically learn from those, but just to familiarize yourself with what's already been done, and then you can more easily visualize what's possible for you. So becoming really familiar with how prayer spaces can look in other contexts, and then visualizing how that can look in your context. The second thing that I would really, really recommend is to just share your thoughts. This process can sometimes feel like you're a bit of an island and you're a little bit isolated in your thinking, but perhaps you're not. You've just not had those communications with other people. So stay connected to anybody within school networks or within your church network, even just family and friends, just to sow those seeds and see what you get back, just to gauge interest, to ultimately find allies in what you're really, really motivated to do, because you might find that somebody else is on the same page as you and has been really dreaming and praying about this path for a long time as well, and you find somebody who you can work collaboratively with and bounce ideas off each other. It's so lovely being in a group of people that you can share those thoughts and share those ideas. And it's really about the logistics, so the planning in terms of specific locations and activities almost coming a bit further down the line. Initially, at this point, it's what's the ideal, what's the dream, what's the intention, and who's on that same page, and how can we go down that journey together. This is all about relationships. Prayer Spaces is a way of really serving the school communities locally to our churches. And so building those relationships, being really relational with other people in those contexts is so, so important. Think about what relationships you already have. And that might be just simply thinking, who do I know that might have that connection already between church and school? It might be a member of your congregation who goes in and volunteers in a primary school to read with children. Maybe they've volunteered to accompany on trips, for example. It might be a governor, a parent governor, a foundation governor who's on the governing body of that school. It might be somebody who works in the same primary trust but a different school. Perhaps somebody on the leadership team goes to your church or a nearby church. Perhaps somebody in your congregation or even a church leader, their children go to the school. Where are those already existing relationships, and how can you utilize that as a way to start conversations? When it comes to having a meeting with a senior leader, effectively having that meeting to say, look, this is what we'd love to do, or this is what we've got that we'd like to bring to your school, I would suggest a really good, simple thing to do is to have an information sheet. I'm going to show you an example of something that I've created in a moment, but effectively creating a really simple document that takes this person who receives that through what even is this? What is press spaces in schools? If those conversations, informal conversations, haven't happened, at a glance, what is it? Why does it exist? Why might the school benefit from it? And what might it look like? So this is an example of one that we've put together that we might send out via email or present in a meeting to say, look, this is what it is. This is what it looks like. Literally, this is the kinds of things we do. It's got on it a couple of testimonials from a child, from a teacher, but also knowing that their school context is different to any other, how might it work for them? So already providing some ideas of, so for example, on here, could be a whole school enrichment, could be an individual class session, it could be support for a permanent prayer station. So just, I suppose, sowing those seeds of potential for what you could bring for prayer spaces in schools. There's going to be a little bit more later in this video in terms of what else you might want to ask specifically in one of those discussions with senior leaders that then does start to think a little bit more around the practical and the logistics. But even thinking about when it comes to serving that community, what resources do you have? And I mean that in terms of people and materials. Church congregations are filled with wonderful people who just have the heart for prayer with young people, but perhaps they don't shout about it. Are there people who you know would be brilliant? But if you asked for volunteers, they might not put themselves forward. They might not consider themselves to be gifted in that area, but you know they could be. Talk to them, speak to them, share your vision, and you can soon build up a really enthusiastic and supportive team, but also resources in terms of materials. What is there within the church? What is there already within the school? Is there scope for local funding, perhaps? Finally, in terms of serving the school community, one of my suggestions would be to really create inspiration for stewarding this. And again, that links back to the sustainability. Where can school pupils, school children themselves take this forward? And that might look like setting up a prayer space and older children come into the prayer space when younger children are there, perhaps to act as readers, or maybe there's a buddy system with year sixes and reception children. It might be that there's a faith ambassador or worship ambassador, pupil chaplain team. Can they, after they've experienced the prayer space, take that inspiration and start to create prayer spaces of their own? Can they take this as a project themselves and start to lead it in the schools? So it's just kind of building that capacity in, and the young people are always far better than we are to take the lead creatively on things like this. Getting involved in the logistics, the location of the press space is really, really key. And it can be quite tricky in a primary school where space is really, really limited. It really does come at a premium within most primary schools. The types of spaces that are available to hold the number of people that you might have inside a class are obviously dining halls or dining spaces, school halls, school gym type spaces. But in primary school, it's very, very common that the hall space is also the dining room space. So it means if you've got a school where you need to be there all day or even on multiple days, you're then taking up the space that they would need as a dining space. So it can be really difficult to manage that, because what you can't always do is set down for lunch, set back up again, because that obviously then takes time out of the day that you might be running those prayer activities. It's not something that's impossible to overcome. We've definitely managed to do that, and I'll explain a little bit more and show you some photos of that. Library spaces, if the school has a dedicated library space, that can be a really, really good space. It might not be as big as a hall, but perhaps that just means tailoring the group sizes a little bit. Perhaps there's a spare classroom. Perhaps there's somebody who has a classroom who is really invested in this and has the heart for this and is happy to say, have my classroom. I don't mind moving around and using a different space for today. I'd love you to use my space. Perhaps there's a church within walking distance of the school. Perhaps it's the connected church to the school. Perhaps it's right next door. And the church space could be used as the prayer space. Often that can be really, really productive when the children are really familiar with the church space, and it already feels like a really special place for them to go into. Outdoors is another really simple alternative when space is at a minimum, but obviously that's very much a seasonal thing. Weather becomes an issue, but it can be a really, really positive and really powerful space to create prayer into. There's lots of alternatives to providing prayer boxes, providing prayer bags, where prayer stations can then be placed wherever the school sees fit. What I would say is a real bit of advice is when you have the heart for prayer spaces in schools, it can be quite easy to just say, yeah, we'll do it there. Yeah, that's fine. Oh, well, we'll make it work. We'll make it work. And there is space for that, but trust your instincts. If the space that perhaps the school is offering to you isn't going to work, perhaps there's too much footfall during the day, perhaps there's going to be too much lifting and shifting during the day because of crossover use, be courageous enough to say that's just not going to work. I'm really sorry. Can we do this instead? Here are some alternatives that you may like to see. So this space it's actually a year six teacher who's really, really, really excited about bringing a prayer space into the school. She said we could have her room, and she said, yeah, my class will go somewhere else. Don't worry, we'll make it work. Please use my room. The picture on the right is actually a side room that had the printer in. And we just covered the printer with a blanket and then turned it into a be still room. Cupboards are great as additional spaces. I mean, cupboards can be great for permanent prayer spaces or little soul spaces, little be still rooms. This space here was in a new build. A primary school was having a full new build of Key Stage 1 buildings. We actually went and hosted a prayer space in there before any children entered the building. So that's certainly one to look out for. If there's any new buildings being constructed, is can you get into the building before it's fitted out to bless the building and to allow pupils to experience prayer in there before anything else happens in there. And then there's no worries about use of the space. This space on this image was actually a sort of a connecting corridor between two classrooms and worked really well as a be still space. This prayer space was meant to be outside. The weather was not on our side at all. So very last minute, we just pulled it inside. We have lots of boxes of prayer stations kind of in a box with all the kit ready. We pulled some of those out as last minute options, and we hosted it up on the stage. So the hall was needed for lunch. So we didn't come into the hall too much, but we were able to shut the curtains on the stage and create this incredible prayerful environment for the children, and it went down really well. This is quite a classic setup for a prayer space. So we're using the school hall. And as you can see, we've pulled out, the climbing rails and bars all pulled out and draped with things. We've also boxed off spaces by using a gazebo inside just to kind of delineate cozier spaces. And there's also a blackout tent in there. So there are ways of bringing spaces within a larger space as well. These are two examples of using a church, how you can't necessarily alter the space as much because you've got, really high ceilings, perhaps furnishings already in place. There may be pews, maybe there's not, but it can be a really good way of hosting a large prayer space without having to use up any of the school environment. These are just in classrooms. This was a prayer box. So on that photo on the left, on that board is, I think, 4 different prayer spaces. So the footprints, the post-it notes, the stars, and there's a little gift tagged box on the table. Those were all little prayer station activities that were given in a box to the school, and they just use them in their classrooms in whatever way the teacher felt was appropriate. You don't need a giant space to do prayer spaces in schools if you don't have it. This was 2 days at quite a big primary school, but they've only got one massive area for lunches. So on the left, that's their effectively normally their lunch hall. We were able to not set down, but just move all of the tents and the TP and so on, just slide them all to the side during lunch, and then we're able to slide them back. So it did work well, but also because of the size of the school. Um, we weren't able, even in 2 days, to get everybody in. So we made the decision actually that EYFS we were going to support separately. So we provided a sort of miniature prayer retreat in a box where we provided six of the prayer activities that the rest of the school were doing on this prayer retreat, just in a slightly alternative way. And then the EYFS teacher led the EYFS children through those prayer stations within their own space. So they were still felt part of the overall school retreat, but they were doing it in their own time when it fit their routine during the day. So that was a really nice way of managing a big school, perhaps where actually they need a little bit more support and giving them their own little prayer stations separately. So that's me in primary. You'll notice that secondary schools, there are some really unique contextual considerations in secondary schools, but then are plenty that will also overlap. But thank you so much for watching this Getting Started training for primary schools, and I hope you have a wonderful time getting started with some prayer spaces.
Hi everyone, I'm Ali. I'm part of the core team for Prayer Spaces in Schools Great Britain. And Naomi's just asked me to share with you today a little bit about getting started when you're setting up in a secondary school. So, first of all, when you're getting started, one of the things that I did was I was actually volunteering in a church high school at the time. I had previous experience of working in primary schools and setting prayer spaces up in primary schools, but this was the first time that I'd started to kind of do any work with secondary schools. And I was volunteering as part of like a chaplaincy team, and I was talking to clergy and other people, and we came up with the idea of giving it a go to do a prayer space in the high school setting. And so what we did was we actually went along, we found ourselves some training. So a bit like you're doing now by watching this video, I found myself some training, and myself and the local curate went on the training, but with a really kind of focused eye on high schools and thinking about the logistics and how we could set it up in our secondary school setting. Something else that you can do if you're thinking about getting started in a high school, there's lots of stories on the Prayer Space website, and you can join us on social media, and they can be really helpful for just giving you a bit of inspiration, thinking about the themes that you might look at, just giving you an idea of how that might be set up. And also you can glimpse a little bit of the impact that a prayer space can have. So, other things that you can do if you're getting started and you want to do a prayer space, a great thing to do is to pray and to just ask God for, to give you those opportunities to get started. And also you might want to visit a prayer space, and you can always get in touch with us at Prayer Spaces in Schools, and we can let you know if there's ones going on in your area that we might be able to put you in touch with, then we'll do that. So as I said, when I started kind of thinking about setting up in a high school, I was already part of that high school volunteering as part of the chaplaincy team. But if you're not already based in the high school itself, then it's worth kind of finding out who is. So who are your organic connections that will help you get started? Perhaps there's kind of local clergy, local church leaders. And in a high school, you might find that there's multiple churches that connect in with the high school itself. So it's worth having a little think about who is there that you could speak to and start that connection with. So other people to kind of think about are governors, school staff, youth workers, or even students or parents themselves. And then something else that you really need to do is, once you're kind of ready and you feel like this is something that you can offer, is to start thinking about arranging a meeting with a senior leader in the school. So it's good if you can find out who the best person would be to speak to, and then arrange to kind of go and chat with them. And it's really good to go in prepared. So if you've done any previous prayer spaces, you could take photos or materials that you've used previously. But if this is your first one, then why not take in some of the kind of articles from the Prayer Spaces in Schools website, or you could show them on social media, so that they can get a real picture of what we mean by a prayer space in school. So I think one of the kind of barriers that we could have is when we talk to schools about prayer spaces, if they've got no preconceived ideas of what that might be, then actually some of them might think we're talking about an empty room and students are meant to kind of come in and pray a set of prayers and things like that. And that's not really what we're talking about. So if schools haven't heard of us before, then actually it's a really good way, by showing pictures and telling stories of other prayer spaces that have happened, whether you've been involved with them or not. It's a great way to kind of help leaders to understand what it is you're offering and what impact that might have on the school. So when you have that meeting with senior leaders, there are a few things that would be really helpful to discuss with them. So obviously you need to work out things like dates. So when are you actually free? When is your team going to be free? When works for the school? So if you want to do it in, for example, the hall and exams are taking place, then that's not going to work. So it's finding out the best set of dates that will work for everybody involved. You also need to kind of really consider how long it's going to be open for. So is every student in the whole school coming, which in a high school is quite, would take some considerable time. And it might be that you are doing that and you've got the time to invest in that. Or it might be that you're going to do it with a particular year group or series of year groups. It might be that you're not going to do it in lesson time, but you're going to offer it to anybody who wants to come during break and lunch times. So there's lots of things just to think through, so you know what you're prepared to offer before you have that conversation with the school, and they might kind of then understand a little bit what they can say yes to as well. So it's also worth kind of thinking about what room space is available. And we'll have a little chat about that a little bit later as well. And if there are any key themes that the school would like to explore, it might be that the school has a particular focus. So for example, I've been into a school in the last couple of years and we've done a prayer space really based around mental health and well-being, because that's something that was a real priority for the school. It might be that the school really want to look at their own values that they're trying to kind of embed within the school culture. So it's really worth having a chat with the school so you can see what kind of thing they might like to explore. Or it might be that you just say, if this is your first space, you could go in on the Prayer Space website. There is a kind of a set of prayer activities for a first prayer space. So you could think, right, we'll go in, we'll do those as a first go. And then you can always kind of look at other opportunities further along the line. So as I mentioned before, it's really important with high schools to really think about how you're going to offer the space. So is it during free time? Is it during lesson time? And if it is during lesson time, which I've done on numerous occasions, it just needs to be timetabled really carefully. So because students are often in different sets and different groupings for different things. So it's really kind of understanding how the school works and how that might work in that particular context. So for example, I've done it before where we've run it through RE lessons. So when everybody has had an RE lesson that week, that's when they've been timetabled to come into the prayer space. And other kind of really kind of simple logistic things to think about are, in high schools, a lot of students carry bags around, blazers around with them, and that kind of thing. So you actually need to agree in advance what you're going to do with those bags. So do they go to their usual classroom, pop their bags down there, and then come to the prayer space? Or are they going to meet at the prayer space, and is there going to be a designated area to leave them to one side? Because what you don't want is lots of bags and things being kind of cluttering up a space that you've curated to kind of um, you know, give them that opportunity to pray. So if you can kind of arrange for the bags to be somewhere not in the middle of your prayer space, that's always a good idea. Okay, so when you're choosing a room for your prayer space, and really a lot of the time you're going to be led by the school on this, so you need to think about what is actually available. So in a high school, you often have a few more options than when you're doing it in a primary school. Um, I've done it before in a chapel, and that chapel led into the hall, and we were able to kind of open the doors, and through the doors in the hall space, we put some gazebos up that just obviously the hall had a roof, so that was fine, but the gazebos just kind of gave it a little space. And it made it feel more like part of the prayer space, so that kind of extended the area that we could use. I've also done prayer spaces in a dance studio with lots of mirrors, and you can work those into the actual activities themselves. I've also done it for high schools in a library and a chapel, over 2 floors, including stairs. And again, that worked really well. So it's just finding out what might work in your context. It might be there's a classroom that you can take over for a week, or it might be that the space that you've got is a corridor, and so you might take a few activities, and if you're in a corridor, you probably wouldn't be coming in lesson time, but children might be, and students might be visiting during their free time. So, and that can be a great way to give a taster to a school of what a prayer space can be like, and then perhaps then move on to other opportunities further down the line. But again, for high schools, just something to consider is that often high schools do kind of externally hire out their spaces. So it's just worth checking if any of the spaces that you're using are being hired out, because obviously you don't want to be setting your prayer space down every evening. So it's really important that you kind of know about that and can talk that through before you kind of suddenly find out that the room's been hired out. Also really good to always think about where your plug sockets are in the room, where your windows are and your lighting are. You obviously need to think about your access and exit so that you can make sure that the room is safe, and children can access it well safely. Also, it's really helpful to go and see the room in advance of the prayer space so that you can actually create a floor plan. So then when you're planning your prayer space, you've got ideas of where you're going to put your different activities. And then, for example, where you might want to be able to plug something in and that kind of thing. When you get to the part where you are starting to kind of actually populate your prayer space and think about the activities that you're going to do, it's really good to choose a balance and variety of different types of activities. So that can be, it's good to think about, well, actually, are all my activities writing? It will be really good to have a balance between writing and some activities that are more action-based, perhaps some activities that are more contemplative, and are more opportunities to kind of think and reflect, rather than to take an action or to write something down. The other thing is just to make sure that across the whole prayer space is an opportunity to kind of reflect on yourself, but also perhaps reflect either on your relationship with others, or just think about other people and the situations that they might be in. Again, to think about the wider world and an opportunity within that space to connect with God. We always kind of suggest that in your prayer space you have something that tackles an issue of justice. And so that often will help you think about how do we make that connection with other people or the world, if you put that in. As I mentioned before, there is a set of 10 activities for your first prayer space. So if you want to kind of go with that, you know that that set has been made so that is already a balance of activities within it. And once you get used to the materials, you can start adding things in, and that kind of thing. You might want to look at, as I mentioned before, doing a theme on something, for example, like mental health and well-being, or something seasonal. So if you've got Easter or Christmas coming up, it might be that you want to do a prayer space that really kind of chimes with that seasonal theme. Or thinking about transition, moving up to new year groups, and that kind of thing. So there's loads and loads of prayer resources on the Prayer Spaces in Schools website. So I'd really recommend just having a little play, having a look around some of those resources. And there are some prayer sets that you can look at. And so not just the first prayer space set, but also sets on these seasonal and other themes that you can kind of dip into and get to know. So I've just got a few examples for you here of ones that I've done in a high school. So this particular high school, this was where we were doing the mental health and wellbeing series. And they were also trying to embed their language of spirituality in their school. So we kind of made sure that each of the different activities linked into the school's own language that they were talking about for spirituality. So again, this isn't the first prayer space that I did. This was after I'd kind of developed and got to know how to do prayer spaces over a period of time. But you can see here, there's a lovely activity called Forgiveness Stones. And this is really good. You can have like MP3 players with a recording on. And on the website, it actually tells you the kind of script to record onto the MP3 player, or you can just print the script out. But this helps students to really think about when they've been hurt, when they may be holding on to unforgiveness. And it talks through, Jesus's teachings on forgiveness. And it gives them an opportunity at the end to really think about, do I want to? So they hold a stone and they're thinking, do I want to keep holding on to this unforgiveness, or do I want to let it go? And they're given that option at the end. And just some of the quotes from students, they said, it helped to leave things that I have hung on to for years. How good is that? That this activity has helped them to let go of something painful that they've been carrying for a long time. Someone else said it helped me to become more like Jesus. And I liked the stones because it was hard to forgive the person before this activity. So when we're talking about that kind of sense of connection with other people, Phil in his book Sticky Note Prayers talks about the idea of actually that self, others, the world, and God, what we're trying to do is to reconcile with each of these things. So this is a great opportunity to reconcile with other people as we think about letting go of unforgiveness. So some really complex themes, but really simple ideas that you can do with students that are really impactful. There's another example here, Bottle of Tears. And this is about, what we did was we took the prayer space activity from the prayer space website, but we matched it with looking at the charity Mind, who support people with mental health and well-being. So the children kind of looked at the Bible verse that talks about, it says, you keep track of all my sorrows, you have collected all my tears in your bottle, from Psalm 56. So the idea that God knows when we're hurting, God knows when we're upset, and he cares for us. And so pupils were able to think about that and then either use that to pray for themselves or to pray for others and the charity that we were thinking about. This other activity is Roller Coaster Life. So a great opportunity. You just basically, it's a massive sheet of kind of wallpaper type paper, and you just go along and draw a roller coaster shaped line along it. So it's not a lot of preparation, and you get some post-it notes, and the students go and think about where they want to put their post-it note on. So it might be on the highs of the roller coaster. They might want to think about a kind of really happy moment that they might want to give thanks for, or they might want to think about the lows, difficult times when life feels difficult, and they might want to ask for prayer around that. So one student said here, it was good to think about days which were amazing. So prayer space, you can't do it on your own. Having a team is an essential part of running a prayer space and making it something that will work well. So it's really helpful to be able to build a team from people who are already DBS checked. you will need to talk when you talk to the school, you will need to talk to them about things like ensuring that your volunteers are DBS checked. Different schools have different ways of approaching that. Some of them might give you different coloured lanyards. Some of them might ask you to bring in your certificates. So it's just worth talking to the school about how they want to approach that. But certainly we would recommend that you only ask people who are already DBS'd. When I did this for the first time, the school that I was supporting had a PAYS team, and so they're kind of a group of young people who were working with local schools, and they were already going into the schools. So we approached them and we kind of partnered with them so that they came onto our team, and again, they already had a relationship with the school. And we also kind of met with local clergy, and there were different people from different churches that came along to help. Something else that we did to kind of include the wider church was we just sent out a flyer saying, this is what we're doing, but we need these things to make it happen. And so we were asking for things like, we asked for CDs because we wanted to be able to have nice reflective a reflective area, and we had hung CDs up, that people were getting rid of. We asked for things like, can you save your cardboard and rip it up, so that we could use that to write big questions on. And the students took a piece of ripped up cardboard, wrote their question to God, and pegged it up onto a giant net. And there were lots of other, like I know we needed a really big mirror, and we didn't have one, so we just kind of put it on our flyer to the churches to say, is there anybody who has got a big mirror that doesn't mind lending it to us? So that's a really good way of getting people involved. Something else that I've done, this was when I was working with a primary school, but it would work for high schools as well, is that I went and did a little talk at the Mothers Union group in the church, and then there were a few of them who said they would like to help on the day, and there was others that were prepared to kind of help with resources. So I had them cutting out fruits of the spirit and all different things like that. So you'll have a team that actually is physically with you, helping you to deliver the prayer space. But even, you don't all have to do all the preparation. There might be a wider team that you can tap into, if there are things that you need or things that you need help with, that might be able to do that even if they're not helping at the actual session. When we ran the space, we kind of generally had 3 or 4 adults in the space at a time. So we ran it where we kind of split it into slots for morning and afternoon, and people told us when they could come, and we set up a rota for that. So we always had one of us who were kind of overall in charge of the space. So one of us was always at a session, and then we had other helpers that were coming in as well. And what I often do is I hold a training session after we've set the prayer space up. So I will quite often take a week, for example, if we're going to start the prayer space, I'll often start the prayer space on a Tuesday, and we'll use the Monday as a setup day. So if you perhaps set up your space on a Monday, and then usually at lunchtime, I'll invite anybody that's coming into the space across the week as a helper to actually come into the space on the Monday lunchtime. And then I just give them a chance to actually walk around it so that they have seen it. I do a 10-minute training session just going through some basics of how it's going to work. And I also, before that, will send out, all the prayer activities and things like that, along with the safeguarding documents from the school, so that all the helpers have had access to that before the session itself. When you're looking for somebody to join your team as well, I've got some qualities written there. These are all from a document on the Prayer Spaces website about getting started. So do feel free to tap into that as well, because a lot of this information is in that document as well. But yeah, when you're thinking about qualities for a volunteer, you want them to be somebody who is prayerful, someone who's inclusive and can understand that in a school, and there's going to be people perhaps of lots of different faiths and perhaps of no faith at all. And the prayer space is for everyone to be able to join in with, although the prayer space we're doing it from a Christian viewpoint. It's for anyone to come and access that and engage with it. Things like being reflective, things like people that can be aware of their context, and perhaps how you might want to talk maybe differently in a school to how you might talk if you were doing something in a Sunday school, for example. Again, because we've got different people from lots of different walks of life who've got different worldviews, different maybe faiths and beliefs. So it's really important that there's a kind of understanding of the range of the context that you're speaking into as well. Obviously, you want them to be a safe person, but they don't need to be a particular age. So we're not looking for young people, we're not looking for old people, we're looking for anybody who has those qualities and is available to come and help. And then finally, just to kind of say, it's really, I think, really helpful if when you're planning the whole prayer space, you also plan in opportunities to think about the impact that it has on the students. And this can be really helpful for the school to actually then think, well, actually, that made a really big difference. So next time the prayer space team ask, we're going to say yes again. But also, I think for the students themselves, the opportunity to reflect on their experience in the prayer space can actually be really powerful. So making space to reflect on that experience, I think, is something that's helpful. Now, these documents here are from when I used to, in high schools, give out questionnaires, and if I still had lots of time, I would still do that. But I used to kind of, on this occasion, I think I analysed 223 evaluations, which was brilliant, and it produced a great piece of work. But there is no expectation that you do that. And actually, I don't do that because I don't have that capacity at this point in time. But what I do is make space at the end of the session. So you might gather the students together and just give them an opportunity to talk about, what stood out to you in this space. Has anything had a positive impact on you today? Just give them an opportunity to talk about what's been helpful. Has anything been helpful to you? And you might be surprised at how willing some of the students are to share their experiences. So definitely give that a go. And you can always scribble down, sticky note some responses as well that you can then share with the school. But just you can see from here, when I spoke to this school, 81% of the pupils said they would like to come to a prayer space again, and 84% said that they would recommend it to a friend. But when you look at the pupil responses, I asked them to kind of describe the prayer space, and it said, so I've just picked out a few of the responses here. So someone said, it's a very calm and relaxed place to remove your worries and make you feel better about yourself. Strange at first, but I got used to it. It gave us lots of time to reflect together and show peace. And then another question, because again, this school we were looking at spiritual development. I said, did the prayer space support you with your spiritual development? And if so, how? So some of the students said, I feel connected to God. It made me feel better and want to help others. It gave me a chance to express myself. It helped me to realize that God created us to be a better person and to think about others. It helped me to think and remember what I love about life and why God does these things. It helped me to have a deep think about God, family, and friends. So, these students don't know that I've set it up to kind of have these opportunities to think about other people and that kind of thing. That's what's coming from them after experiencing the space. And then finally, again, because it was mental health, we just asked the question, did the prayer space support you with your mental health? And these students said, I feel more relaxed and less worried about my future. I was having a bad day, and afterwards I felt supported and calm. Somebody else said, it let me say the things I can't say out loud. And someone said it helped me release my emotions alongside supporting others. So, all really good stuff. And all I would say to you is if you are thinking about setting up a prayer space in a high school, absolutely do it. It is so wonderful. It's such a wonderful experience, not only for you as the person doing it and the helpers doing it, but the students respond so brilliantly to this opportunity to engage with prayer and to try praying for themselves, or to just have an opportunity to reflect for themselves on some of these themes that we're offering. So I would just say go for it, get a team around you that can support you. And if you need any further help, don't hesitate to get in touch with Prayer Spaces, and we'll do our best to draw alongside you and help you as you start this new journey. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Bye.